Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the Microsoft Surface Pro 2. So in this second generation Surface Pro tablet computer, Microsoft really has upped the ante, but more so in terms of what's under the hood rather than in what you're looking at aesthetically. In fact, the actual design is pretty much identical to the first generation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that would be my first true critique of Surface Pro 2, is that even though I would often argue if it isn't broken, don't attempt to fix it, in this case, Microsoft, I think, could have made some effort to slightly redesign, maybe slim down the machine, but then again, a 2-pound tablet that really can act as a full-blown Ultrabook is a feat in itself. So maybe weight really isn't a truly legitimate complaint. But moving along, let's talk about the brand new configurations as well as what really has been improved, because as I mentioned, it's what is under the hood that counts in this second generation product. So you can pick this up in 4 different storage capacities, which also are accompanied by different RAM configurations. You can go with either a 64, 128, 256, or 512 SSD capacity. This is the 128, which is really the middle of the road, I think the most popular selection. Both the 64 and 128 come with 4 gigs of RAM. The 256 and 512 are accompanied by 8 gigs of RAM. So clearly the 256 and 512 are aimed at power users, but here's the catch. All 4 models are based around the Intel Core i5 Haswell chip, so you're not going to get any more performance from the actual processor. So keep that in mind when making your selection, because whether or not you really need the difference in storage capacity and will see a true difference in the 4 to 8 gigs of RAM really depends on what you plan on doing with this little dynamo. So a 10.6-inch display here for $1,000 in this specific configuration. By the way, the price points are $900, $1,000, $1,200, and I believe $1,700, or it might even be $1,800, for the 512. And clearly the 512 is out of touch with reality, unfortunately. I think all the other models are expensive, but warranted considering the R&D, build quality, and overall experience you're going to get out of Surface Pro 2, which you simply won't from any other competing device, let alone tablet. So what do we have here? First of all, a Wacom Digitizer here is the experience. We have a stylus that we can use. It's not going to be the traditional experience that you would expect from a mobile OS, clearly, because here, even though you do have the mobile side of Windows in RT, which we're looking at right now, you also, through a simple touch of the start button there, can jump straight to your full-blown desktop. And unlike Surface RT or Surface 2, this is a true computer. Granted, only an Ultrabook, you have a low-voltage i5 Haswell processor, but part of that big enhancement in that i5 Haswell is that we now have incredible battery life when compared to the first generation. You're now looking at a tablet computer that really can last you throughout a day. Anywhere from 6 to 7 hours at the very least is what you're going to see in battery life from this. When you compare it to last generation, you were really looking at 4 to 5 at best. So this is a big improvement. Again, that's going to depend on what you do with brightness settings as well as productivity. This is a multitasking powerhouse. There's no question about it. You really can do a lot of different things with it because, after all, you don't have any of that compromise or limitation often offered by competing tablet products. Now, it is still relatively heavy at 2 pounds. I mentioned that it has retained that same form factor, same build quality, which I like. One improvement is the kickstand, because we now have moved to a kickstand that has 2 pivot points, so an expanded range of motion. As you can see, that is the 40-degree, and then the original, which was really what Microsoft considered a productivity mode, but I think they realized more is more when it comes to viewing angles with a product like this. Overall build quality is just impeccable. In fact, Microsoft has patented their own actual build materials for this, which really are very similar to aluminum and or magnesium, and it really is just a solid overall feel. It's just built like a brick. You can see we've got our power button right there, microphone up at the top center. Our rear camera, unfortunately, the cameras haven't been upgraded. So not only has the aesthetic not been upgraded, and it looks identical to the first gen, but the cameras are also identical. We've got 720p cameras on both the front and back of this tablet, which are probably the least impressive specification of such a high-end piece of hardware, because something built so well with such great features, that new Haswell processor that really takes it into another class of mobile computing, really ends up leaving a lot to be desired when it comes to those webcams. Luckily, cameras, I think, aren't necessarily the top feature that most users will be looking for in a device like this, since, again, it's unmatched. You do have a USB 3.0 port, which you can see right there above the lip for the actual kickstand, volume rocker, and then a 3.5mm headphone jack that's also a microphone port. On the other side, we've got our Pogo charging port, which also will take on the magnetic stylus. As you can see, we've got pretty simple pairing there. It just snaps right in, so you could leave that on, easy to remove. And it is a great companion to this computer tablet. Don't for 1 second think that that's not an added value here. It is. Certainly changes the way you can use the device, especially since you don't get a type or touch cover with this out of the box. Displayport for video out, arguably probably the most versatile format you could have on a device like this. And then a micro SD card slot for storage expansion, which is critical considering, we do have a 64 gig model, 128 gig. Both of those leave a lot to be desired, in my opinion, after you actually take into account how much room Windows 8.1 takes up on the SSD built in. But in terms of other internal upgrades, Bluetooth 4.0, dual band Wi-Fi, which performs exceedingly well. The overall experience is just fantastic. There's really nothing to complain about. Everything that I throw at this, it just chews up. Speed certainly just flies. I mean, you're not going to see any hesitations from this device at all, and you shouldn't. We've got a Haswell processor powering an entire tablet experience, something that, yes, was done in the original Surface Pro. We did have another Ultrabook class i5 chip, but with the added battery life as well as just improved functionality here, things just get better. And you can see the speed there in the Wi-Fi. I'm nowhere near my router. This is where all of my videos take place, and yet this is outperforming clearly just about anything you could possibly try to put it up against. Of course, flash is not going to be a problem. So it really just works as expected. Multitasking, again, is a breeze. That's what Windows 8.1 is all about. It does not come with the full Office suite, only a trial, much like any other computer, whereas Surface 2, of course, comes with it because that's an incentive to get for Microsoft to entice users to take on the tablet end of Surface rather than the full-blown computer that we're looking at here. Battery life, as I mentioned, really solid, a tremendous improvement. Also, charging time, also impressive. It only takes somewhere between 3 and 4 hours to get a full charge out of this, which I found to be particularly good, in fact, better than most Ultrabooks with similar battery life that are based around the i5 Haswell chipset. Graphics improvement here also, because we do now have a bump up over the HD 4000 to the HD 4400. You are going to see slightly better graphics performance when it comes to gaming. Now, this is not a gaming machine, but if you want to play older titles like Team Fortress 2, as well as a variety of other games that are extraordinarily popular that just don't require extreme horsepower when it comes to graphics, especially requiring discrete graphic solutions, then you're going to do really well here. And this is one area or arena that Intel has really upped the ante for themselves, because they realized it was an area that they had pretty much left in the past and dust. And that was something that customers really required. The 10.6-inch 1080p display, really identical to last generation, one of the better ones out there. I do believe that the display, which is also 10.6 inches and 1080p on the Surface 2, is actually slightly better in terms of color accuracy and overall representation. But that's, take that with a grain of salt. I think you have to see them side by side to really make the comparison, much like I did myself. I think if this is the only display that you ever look at, you're going to be in love with it. The same goes for the Surface 2. So really, side by side is necessary to make that determination. But performance here, with everything, whether you want to use Photoshop, even light video editing, you can do it all. And that's the beauty of the Pro lineup. And with Haswell, you don't have to worry anymore that taking this thing to the limit is going to end up netting only 4 hours of battery life, or 4.5. Now you actually have a machine where you don't have to worry about how hard you press it, so to speak. One of the best accessories is, of course, the type cover. For $130, it will connect using the magnetic pogo port. This can also be found on the Surface 2. You can then, of course, employ the Kickstand, and you've got a full productivity environment. So that's where both the Surface 2 as well as Surface Pro 2 really convert themselves into full-blown computers. Even though the Surface 2 isn't a full-blown computer, and this one is, they both do really emulate the computing experience better than any other tablet on the market. Now, in this case, if you do really require a Ultrabook in the form of a tablet, you've got it. But the end result, in my opinion, of what you get out of this, because here you've got a really functional keyboard with backlighting, something vacant from the previous generation of the type cover. In fact, improvement overall, the build quality is better. I like the cloth cover finish better. It's just an overall nicer accessory that really does function better. But the point I was making was more to the fact that, when you're looking at something like the Surface 2 and whether or not it's really going to meet your needs, it's more of understanding that it is a compromise, even though it is supposed to be the zero compromise tablet computer, because it is very difficult to be both. And as a matter of that principle, it ends up falling into a gray area, in my opinion. It is still unmatched. There's nothing like it. In fact, this is one of my favorite devices. This is something I've been waiting for a very long time. I can't tell you how long I've been waiting. I mean, I know I just said it, but I'll reiterate it because this is pretty much a dream device. Even though Microsoft, as I mentioned before and will again, didn't do anything in terms of form factor to redesign things, they really didn't need to, because this is a marvel when it comes to computing, mobile and otherwise, because this really can legitimately replace an Ultrabook or laptop in the way that a Surface 2 can almost replace it, or another mobile tablet, Android or iOS alike, can try to replace a computer, but this really can. But with that said, you still have to accept the fact that because it attempts to do both, it really isn't going to give you the best experience in either realm. So that really is the only drawback, in my opinion, to this latest generation of Surface Pro 2, is that you have to understand that it is still a compromise, even though it offers the best compromise, even at an expensive price point, $900 to, as I mentioned, $1,700 or $1,800. And that really boils down to that, as I keep saying, it's tough to try to pull off both tasks. But this keyboard helps in a big way. Backlighting really does make you feel like you're using a true laptop or Ultrabook. It's actually touch sensitive, so it senses when you're going to actually use the keyboard, therefore bringing up the backlight, turning it off when you're not there, so that sense of presence, of course, does help to manage battery life. Yet another great feature that Haswell is going to only bolster furthermore, because Haswell is all about improvement in battery life. That was, again, really Surface Pro's, the original generation's biggest drawback. I mean, clearly it didn't have the advantage of this upgraded keyboard. It did not have the battery life, but everything else you see here outside of the graphics that I mentioned, Bluetooth 4.0 and improved Wi-Fi chipset, the original Surface has. So the real question becomes, do you need to upgrade or buy this version as opposed to picking up an inexpensive first-gen Surface Pro 2? And to that, I would say it really depends if you require the battery life, because all of the accessories like this keyboard, as well as the power cover that they'll be coming out with, the wireless cover accessory adapter, as well as the actual dock, which all speak to how much more polished this generation of the Surface Pro really is. You'd think it's even more than just second gen, even though, again, this wasn't redesigned. Everything else has been. I think if you don't require the battery life, then the Surface Pro, the original one, is a compelling value as its price continues to decrease. Right now it's at 700 and 800, 64 and 128 gig respectively. But I do expect those prices to soften a little bit more. Who knows what we'll see on Black Friday from Microsoft directly. And if you can get, a $300 price gap on the 64 gig model, which would be tough, but if you could somehow pull that off, then clearly the first gen is a really compelling offering. In fact, I think a lot of people just saving $100 or $200 will go for the first gen and live with that mediocre when compared to this gen battery life. But in my opinion, at current pricing, there's no reason not to go for the new generation. The improved battery life alone should be enough for most users, especially since this is all about mobility. And how can you really call this a portable laptop in the form of a tablet if it can't outlive its tablet competitors? Now, granted, this version still can't outlive the Surface 2 in terms of battery life or other mobile OS driven tablets, but it gets as close as any full-blown PC in tablet form has ever achieved. So, if you really tweak out the power saving settings, you may even get to approach 7.5, 8 hours. So that says a lot about the improvement of Haswell. It's not, as I mentioned before, a complete double, but it's very, very close. That micro SD card slot for storage expansion will give you the ability to up the ante by 64 gigs, at least at present. But of course, because this is a computer, expect that as standards improve and increase, you won't have a compatibility issue here because this runs full Windows 8.1. Again, do not confuse this with Surface 2. And that means that you're not waiting like you are with mobile-driven devices like the iPad and Android tablets for updates in order to get more functionality. You inherently have it because this is an actual computer. The Wacom Digitizer really just cherries on top. If you need it as a graphic designer, an artist of any sort, you're going to be really happy with it because, quite frankly, it's the best integrated digitizer experience you're going to get from any laptop right now, let alone a tablet Ultrabook experience. I did compare this to the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 2014 because the S Pen is exceedingly popular, but clearly very different because here you've got access to Windows applications. There you're restricted to the Android ecosystem. So not really a true comparison, but in terms of having a actual Wacom Digitizer experience, this is really one of the better added values of the Surface Pro and Pro 2 offering. But overall, really like this package. Again, build quality, stellar, no dead pixels, very little backlight bleed, a little bit more here than on my Surface 2. Surface 2 almost zero backlight bleed. That could just be a matter of the variation of sample, but I think it speaks more to the fact that the Surface 2 got a far greater redesign than the Surface Pro 2, and that's because quite frankly, the Surface Pro 2 really didn't have a problem selling, whereas the Surface RT was a flop, and there's no question that Microsoft has been working ever since to make sure that this new generation goes above and beyond what even the expectations for a second gen could possibly offer. But overall, really like this tablet. If you're looking for that full-blown computer experience, not sure why it wasn't just powering on there. Might have had to do something with the separation of the keyboard dock, even though it shouldn't have, but it seems to be now not powering on, which is odd. But overall, again, the Surface Pro 2 really best in class, best hardware and software combination you're going to possibly find, unless you're completely opposed to dealing with Windows 8.1. I really see absolutely no reason why this wouldn't be the device that you would want to be using every day if portability and power is what you're looking for. Again, now it just came back, oddly enough. Not sure why it wasn't responding there. That's one of the few bugs I've actually seen with this device. Haven't really seen any other noteworthy ones. So that was the first time caught on film for all of you, for those of you who don't think my reviews are accurate or honest, which they are, unfortunately, for those speculative types. This should be proof in the pudding. Here, a computer tablet experience that I've been complimenting heavily clearly just exhibited a bug, which if I wanted to hide it, editing clearly would be at play. But again, no need to edit, because even outside of that, that's the first time I ever saw that happen. This is unmatched in the marketplace, and Microsoft, really kudos to them on this product. Of course, the next generation, if you're asking yourself, should you wait for the next generation? Well, you can always ask yourself that question. Will it have better specifications, better battery life? Most definitely, especially considering the fact that Microsoft, as I've mentioned over and over again, didn't redesign this product because they already had a winner. They just improved upon it. Much more of an evolutionary than revolutionary update. But again, because it tries to be the best of both worlds, it doesn't really end up, of course, yielding the best traditional computing experience or traditional tablet experience. But for the person who needs to have both in one, you get it at a 2-pound, and I will say still clunky form factor, because it is. I do believe they could have made it thinner. I've mentioned this before. It really is still my only true critique of the Surface Pro 2. Otherwise, love this machine. I think it's perfect for so many different types of users, students, business professionals, as well as just the average Joe that's looking for everything in one device. This really can replace just about everything, as long as you pair it with the Type or Touch cover, which again, huge revamp. The multi-touch scrolling in here is solid, backlit keyboard, quick access to brightness, volume, search, sharing, settings, everything you could possibly need from a true desktop computing environment. It's all really a matter of whether or not you really do need this zero compromise, which unfortunately still, like anything else, does offer some compromise. But again, really enjoy this product. Happy to spend the time with it, and hope all of you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.